To qualify for a social grant in South Africa, you have to meet certain basic requirements. To start off, you have to be a citizen, a permanent resident, or a refugee, or in the case of the social relief of distress grant, you can also be a specific permit holder. In addition, you have to pass a means test, which is a test for financial criteria to ensure that you are in the financial need that is required as they target the grants. Um, you also have to ensure that you're not living in a state run institution such as a prison, because the state is already caring for you there, so you cannot get a grant. And then finally, you can only get one of each type of grant. So if you already get an older person's grant, you cannot get a disability grant as well. The different types of social grants that are available in South Africa are divided into two groups: the sort of permanent grants and then the social relief of distress grant. The permanent ones are the Older Persons Act, that's payable to someone 60 years or older. The disability grant, that is payable to someone who is so disabled that he or she cannot provide for their own income. Then there's the War Veterans Grant that is payable to veterans of certain wars. This must not be confused with veterans of the struggle. The grant they get is from a completely different system, not from the social grant system. Then there are the grants that people generally call the child grants, but that is inaccurate because the grants are not paid to the children, they are paid to the person raising the child. If there's a child-headed household, then if there's a child that's the head of the household that is age 16 or older, then the grant could be paid to that child head of the household for the other children. The child support grant is payable to the primary caregiver of a child. Does not have to be a parent. It has to be the person that looks after the needs of the child on a daily basis. So it can be an aunt or a grandmother. Then there's the foster child grant, which is payable to the foster parent that the state put the child in care of. So it's not a child you just take in to take care of. The state had to be involved. And then finally, there's the care dependency grant that is payable to parents or guardians or caregivers of a child that is so severely disabled that the child needs full-time care. There are two top-up grants. There's the grant in aid that's payable to beneficiaries of the older person's grant and the disability grant if they need full-time care. And then there's the top-up grant on the child support grant that is payable to caregivers who are relatives of orphaned children. The last grant is the social relief of distress grant that is payable to people who are aged 18 to 59 years. So those would be the people who do not qualify for any of the other grants, and they would get the social relief of distress grant. They must just show that they are in financial need. When you want to apply for a social grant, it depends on which type of grant you are applying for. If you are applying for older persons, disability, war veteran, child support, foster child grant, or a care dependency grant, you have to do an in-person application at your nearest SASSA office. If you don't know where that is, you can ask around in your community, or if you have access to the internet, you can of course check on the internet where your nearest SASSA office is. But you have to go in person. They are rolling out home visits to very frail people who cannot go in. This used to be regular before COVID, and of course then it had to stop, but it's being rolled out again. So just find out whether a home visit for an application would be possible in your case. For the social relief of distress grant, you can only apply online at this stage. And you can either use a laptop and apply online on the internet, or you can use a mobile phone, a smartphone, or if it's not a smartphone, there is a USSD code option. Please remember that if you use a mobile phone to apply, that if it's not your own phone, that it's the phone of someone who's nearby you that you have regular contact with, because SASSA will get back to you on that particular phone. If you have issues with SASSA and the social grants, it once again depends on what type of issue you have. If your issue is that you applied for a grant and your application was denied, was declined, um, then just go back to SASSA to find out. When they give you the feedback, they would have to give you the reason why you didn't get the grant. And in many cases, it may just be a case of you not having had provided the correct or sufficient enough information. Um, it's always best to go back to them. There is an appeals process if you remain dissatisfied with the outcome. It is handled by an independent tribunal, but staff at SASSA will assist you to get the process going. Um, if your issue is that you used to get the grant and now suddenly the payments have stopped, you have to be aware of the fact that SASSA can review the grants regularly, and they might have found something out that they think disqualifies you from the grant. Some of the grants are also temporary. The social relief of distress grant usually is only there for a year unless it is renewed. So there may be a very good reason why the grant payment was stopped. Once again, find out from SASSA why that happened. For legal advice, it is tricky. I wouldn't advise going to a lawyer and paying for advice. Firstly, because in most instances, the lawyer would not have done Social Security law. It is not taught as a module at all law faculties to LRB students. In fact, UWC law is the only law faculty in the Western Cape that teaches it as a module. So unless you are 100% guaranteed that your lawyer is a UWC graduate who did Social Security law, you would be better off speaking to a social worker or somebody at a community organization, somebody at the advice office. Non-governmental organizations can assist you with that. And in most cases, as I say, best option is to go and speak to SASSA themselves. They do make mistakes. They just don't make mistakes the whole time. So it is best to just follow up with them.